Hey there, I'm Helen Young-McLaughlin, and I am back with another week of Leading from the Middle. It's an opportunity that I have taken this year to connect with 23 different leaders to learn a little bit more about what they believe companies can do to transform their middle managers into their most valuable asset. And I do this by asking one question. But before I jump into that, let me introduce you to my guest this week, Misty Reich. She is an executive coach and she is the founder of 35,000 Skincare, which, by the way, is amazing. I am using it currently. And so I'd like to welcome Misty today. Hey, Misty.
Hi, thank you for having me. This is fun.
Absolutely. I also want to mention that in addition to you being an executive coach and a founder of this amazing skincare line, you worked at the executive level for AT&T and Young Brands too, also.
Exactly. Yes, both, as well
All of the
as.
above.
Yes.
And you're a mom and a wife and all of these other wonderful things. So Misty, tell me a little bit more about the work you're currently doing or even your previous work that connects to
Mhm.
what we're talking about today.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I love this. And I've told you briefly, but this is inspiring me to get thinking about doing something a little bit more bold and challenging. So thank you for being an inspo for me. And obviously, thank you for the plug for the skincare. That's always welcome as well. My career background was human resources. So I led human resources in multiple divisions of AT&T Wireless, different iterations of that business for 11 years. And then at Young Brands, which is KFC, Pizza Hut, Taco Bell, or Kentucky Hut, as people like to call it. And in that company, I was the head of the global division or the international HR, which was 123 countries, over 1 million employees in that business. And then my last stint in the corporate world with Young Brands, I was out of HR and I was a general manager running KFC franchise business in 23 countries across Europe. I am an expat. I have lived outside of the US since 2007, most of that time in London. Now I'm in Spain. And yes, I do have a wonderful husband, 2 kids that are in university. And our base in the States is outside of Austin. We have a farm. We raise longhorn cattle. So diverse. I think that's a bit of a red thread, lots of different things in there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I love that because I think that's going to enrich this conversation today. Because I think there's some commonalities, but I want to defer to your expertise when we get into that. And by the way, I've never been to Austin. I've heard many wonderful things about it. So you're
So fun.
inspiring me maybe to like take a little trip over there.
It's so fun. It's so fun. And yes, today I'm doing different things. I'm the founder of this skincare brand, which was a passion of mine, kind of solving a problem that I had. My other day jobs, I am an advisor, executive coach. Is such a broad thing. I advise CEOs and C-suite around people and strategy topics, and a lot of it is around development of capabilities, organizational structures, retention of high potential talent, those kinds of things. And then I do some board work as well, and that's me.
Awesome. And as another coach, I believe that we can bring so much value to people who welcome gaining a new perspective, right? That's what
Yeah.
coaching to me is really about.
Yeah.
And so let's talk a little bit about the question of the day.
Mm-hmm.
Question of the week, which is what is one thing, and I know so many people have struggled with one thing, it's the truth, but what is one thing that you think companies need to pay closer attention to when it comes to developing their managers?
Mm-hmm. I like that you asked that it was one thing. It really forced me to go back, and I did a little bit of journaling and sort of thinking about all of my years running HR functions.
Mm-hmm.
What was the thing that I thought tripped leaders up the most that ultimately led to the demise of otherwise exceptional leaders? Because I thought I was a mid-level manager listening to this, watching your videos. I would be doing this because I want to know, how do I break through? right?
Yeah.
How do I make it? How do I climb the ladder successfully in a way that feels good? So I sort of went and backwards engineered and said, well, what made bigger leaders fall off the ladder that should have been solved for earlier?
Yeah.
And if I distill that down, I think that it's the ability, teaching managers, developing them to have their own internal ability to accurately read how other people are experiencing their behavior real time. When I thought back to the leaders who should have made it but didn't, and got the
What
axe.
stood out to you?
What stood out to me is I had never had a regrettable loss that was because of task. None of them didn't know what to do. They all knew the what part of the job. It was their behavior. They didn't know how to read how people experienced them, and then they didn't know how to calibrate once they were told. And, you know, I have a number of examples of leaders who were absolutely exceptional, but for this one thing. And when you distill it down, we judge ourselves on our intention. What am I intending to have happen in this moment? But we judge the other people across from us by their behavior. How do I experience their behavior? But we never talk about those things. I never tell you, hey, here's what's my intention in this moment and how I want you to feel. And you never say, hey, this is how I read your behavior. And just to give you an example, because I think you'll relate to this and your listeners will relate to this. This is a very common one. As a manager, say I have a team of 5 or 6 people and they're associates or entry-level managers. And my intention, Misty, as a leader, I want them to feel supported. I want them to see me as someone who rolls up their sleeves, who's not distant and aloof. That's my intention. So what I do is several times a day, I check in with them to see how they're going on getting their assignments done, right? I just want to check in. How are you progressing on your deadlines? Okay, so that's me living my intention. I want to be supportive and I want to be hands-on, right? And not aloof. And how do you experience me in that moment, right?
Well, I'm laughing right now because I might experience you as back off, I've got it.
That's it. That's exactly it. So
and we did not prepare
common.
for this. I'm just telling my listeners right now.
But this particular dynamic, and you will know this, that exact example comes up over and over and over again. That support versus control experience. You experience me as micromanaging will be the words that will most often come up, or controlling. And so if someone had taught me as a leader early on that my intentions are not automatically going to be what's experienced, and if they had taught me this one tool called front loading, where I sit down with the team and say, let me tell you how I want you guys to experience this. We're going to start this project, and what I want to be for you and how I want you to experience me is I want you to experience me as supportive. I want you to experience me as hands-on and not absent. I want you to experience me as concerned and interested. Okay. If at any point in this project you get a different experience from me, could you just raise your hand and go, whoa, pause, and let's calibrate. Okay. Because I know sometimes when I'm trying to do that, it could be experienced as micromanaging. That's not, micromanaging is not what I'm trying to have happen.
Right.
So if you feel that, flag it to me. Can you imagine what my leadership career could be like if I could accurately do that? Okay. So the front loading being a huge tool in that.
Yes, I love that tool. I actually call it setting the stage, and we have different opportunities when we're managing and leading to do that, because we may, have new team members, and I say, let's redesign it and then set the stage. This is exactly what you're talking about with the front loading. I love that. And I love the word calibrate, because I think we have the opportunity at any given time to figure out, oh, this cadence feels like way too fast. Let me stop, reflect, and figure out how to recalibrate, calibrate, whatever word you want to use, so that we can all kind of come back to center and make sure we're on the same page. But what happens, Misty, in the real world? We go too fast. We've got so many things to do. We don't slow down. and I love the power of the pause,
Mhm.
to assess what are we feeling, what are we sensing, but I want to hear from your perspective what you notice.
Yeah, well, and I think that's so spot on. And if I could be really honest, what's happening as a leader in that moment is your spidey senses start to go off, right? That something's not quite right. That the teams, there's a vibe, they're not responding to you quite right. Maybe they're still doing what you need them to do, but it doesn't,
Mhm.
just something feels a little off. We don't raise that because that feels vulnerable. That feels like I'm insecure here and I should feel secure and confident here. And the reality is, those spidey senses are you really brilliantly using your EQ, having that tuned in. And if you could do the pause in that moment and say, hey guys, we're just going to do a quick check in. How's it going? How are you feeling? Here was my intention. Is that how you're experiencing this?
Right.
Is there anything that you need that's not happening? I love the framework of your truth, my truth, the truth
Right.
being different things, right? So it can be true that, we're each having different experiences. If you leave it unchecked, we take those different experiences and head off. And, this is why we have 360s in companies, is because we've
Right.
never taught people, leaders, and team members how to calibrate their experience real time. So we spend hundreds of thousands of dollars in companies to implement these 360 tools that everyone hates. Why do they hate them? Because they're not insightful. They're way after the fact. You get
Mhm.
smacked over the head. They're not
Right.
actionable because they're too late. So I think all that boils down to the one thing is, if we could teach our managers how to comfortably set the stage
Mhm.
for what they want to have happen, and then check in and calibrate along the way, knowing that they're judging themselves on their intentions, but their team members are judging them on how they experience their behavior. And one more complexity, their team members are assessing that behavior with the context of everything that's happened to them in their whole entire life,
Right.
that you as a manager couldn't possibly know.
Right.
So there's no way to solve for that, but to talk about it.
And for new managers, Misty, I think it's really important for them to have that ongoing support, right? It's not, hey, let's get you in the role and maybe support you for a couple of months. It's ongoing.
Yeah.
Hey, even senior leaders, we know that's why there's executive coaches.
Yes.
They want, they need, they are appreciative, most of them, for the reflection, like, hey, this is how I'm perceiving you at this moment. Could that be how your team is perceiving you? And so I think you use a specific tool. I use a tool in my program called the DISC, which I think many people
Mm-hmm.
have heard about. And it's kind of a foundational tool that allows managers to really understand how they, show up. I really look at it from a pace perspective. Am I fast
Mm-hmm.
paced, or maybe more moderately or slower paced? Because that
Yeah.
matters. What
Yeah.
preferences, how do I typically like to receive information? Give me facts, give me figures, or tell me a story, paint the picture kind of thing.
Yes.
So the pace, the preference, and then the priorities. So my priority
Mm-hmm.
might be accuracy, and your priority might be collaboration. And so we may be clashing in that way. But if we have an understanding, that's why I love this tool, because I really do think it helps people realize, oh, that's why they, ask me for X, Y, and Z, or that's why they irritate me.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
what do you use? Do you use anything in particular?
I love using tools. I think I love Heart Styles. It's a tool that to me is really differentiated, because I love DISC. I love MBTI, Enneagram. Those are all type indicators. And the
Mhm.
thing that I love the most about the type indicators is they give you insights and self-awareness, but more importantly, in a team context, they give you shared language.
Yes,
They give you words to call things
love
that
that.
you wouldn't otherwise know how to dimensionalize and talk about.
Mhm.
To me, that's the most powerful thing about the type indicators. Heart Styles I like in particular because it is actually asking, it's a 360 tool. And it's not asking how I'm likely to behave, which is what the type indicators do, which is really useful. Actually, the hard styles is saying, actually, how do you experience me right now? How are you experiencing me? So it's getting at this difference between this disconnect, and it'll show the disconnect because I'll do my self-assessment, which when it'll be shown as different potentially than a group, and how they experience me in certain ways that allows me to start closing that gap. And creating that connection, the relationship. And I think the type indicator, so DISC is a great one, combined with a tool like this. So here's how I'm likely to behave. Here's how I'm wired to be. And then here's how people are actually experiencing me. It's irrespective of how I'm wired to behave. Here's what it feels like to be on the other side of me, right?
And I think these tools, it's why development is so important, because we know what happens. Managers do, or individual contributors, fabulous, doing great, rocking it, go over into management, minimal to no support, sporadic support. But these skills that we're talking about, you mentioned EQ earlier, and just for those listening, in case you don't know that, it really talks about emotional intelligence, which is understanding, you know, not only how you're reacting, but how others, it is reading the room, right?
Yes.
Understanding how others might be responding, and being able, I love the word, to flex or be a little more agile in your approach based on that. And that is not an easy, I was never exposed to that early in my career. Had I been, perhaps, whatever, you know, but I've learned it along the way.
Yeah.
But here's what we want companies to kind of leave with from what I'm hearing from you. And I want you to say it, but what I'm hearing is spend some time, spend some money, get a strategy in place to ensure that your managers have that emotional awareness and are able to understand and learn how to flex their style so they can grow and develop into future leaders within your own company.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely essential. And I think really specifically within that, it's this very, very specific thing that if you as a manager want to set yourself apart, you need to learn how to find out real time, all by yourself, how people are actually experiencing you. Okay. And you need to be able to capture what was my intention in that moment and how did it actually land with Sally, with John, with Jane, with Adam. By the way, going to be different for each one of them because they have different experiences. And then you want to be a superstar, then you learn how to flex with each one of them in appropriate ways, right? So it's that reading the relationship real time. So it's like that step beyond reading the room. And you know, you mentioned in your own experience, wow, I didn't get this development. The other thing I think is so important for managers to know is there's a good chance you may never have a leader that you work for who is the ultimate best person to develop you. You may not work in a company that really shows up with your development package in a way that's really powerful for you. What if you need to build this yourself, right? Don't wait for someone else because it may not come. It may not come. And it's absolutely essential that you create your own like board, if you will. And certainly when you get to the C-suite, you know this, Helen, it is you. You know, and if you're the CEO of a company, you are the developer of yourself. So developing that ability to develop yourself and seeing that as your responsibility, anything the company brings is additive, it'll make a huge difference.
It also goes back to a little bit of ask for what you need. I know this back in my corporate career, I wasn't getting what I needed from a development standpoint. So I did invest in myself, and it by far was one of the best things I had ever done. It led me to where I am right now. So I think it is twofold. If you believe that your company can support you, ask for it, you know, like, hey, what would it look like if I could get a coach? And here's my plan. Like, don't just go, you know, obviously have a plan around it. And I also think for companies to pay attention to turnover costs are tremendous. They can be in the millions, you know, if you have one manager who, you know, you could otherwise support through coaching and get them these skills that aren't necessarily intuitive, right? They're rock
Yes.
stars in their specific roles, but this is a whole different set of skills that they need to learn. And so the turnover costs can be tremendous. It can be up to 2 times that person's salary. So we
Yeah.
have to rethink it, I think, from a company standpoint, organizational level. Like, what does it would be one question. So what does it look like for us to develop our managers for long-term,
Mhm.
you know, sustainability? Like, we want
Yeah.
them here. We want to support them in the roles. And by the way, it's not just about the tasks, right? It's,
Right.
you
Yeah,
know
the
that from
task
the
is the
HR
easiest
standpoint,
part. It's the easiest
right?
part to recruit for. We can be highly accurate in assessing incoming talent on their task capability. We're
Yes.
really good at that. We're very poor at assessing what they're actually going to be like, what it's going to feel like to sit next to them or work next to them or work for them. We're very poor at assessing that, and that's where people fail.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think it's hugely important.
So
I'm so
Misty,
glad that
thank
you're
you.
focused on this area.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, it is such a passion of mine. I could continue talking on and on, but I'll wrap. I'll start to wrap. I call it land the plane. Um, for you, is there anything in particular that you want a bottom line or just leave our listeners with before we wrap things up?
I think the bottom line is I would just encourage each one of the listeners to create their own plan, be the advocate for themselves.
Mhm.
Absolutely, as someone who was the CHRO for a number of years, if anyone had come, whenever employees came to me and said, "Here's what I think I'm needing, and I've thought about it, and here's a few things that I think that I could be part of doing," I'd become practically emotional. Like,
Mhm.
yes to this, yes to
Yes.
this. So, to your point, advocate for yourself. Absolutely ask your company, find your HR or your leader and come to them with an idea, a request, and a plan. And if it's not there, no big deal. It doesn't mean you need to leave the company. It doesn't mean it's not where you're supposed to be. Go ahead and build out the resource around you
Yes.
to get your own development.
I love that. Thank you, Misty. Where can people find you if they want to learn more about you and the work that you're doing currently?
I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram at Misty Reich. Definitely come to 35,000. We talk about not only skincare, but there's development aspects of it, career aspects of it. Our aim is to help you travel more beautifully through your life and your career. So you can find me in those places.
Awesome. Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for listening this week to Leading from the Middle. You can reach me if you're out there and not connected with me yet on LinkedIn at Helen Young-McLaughlin. And you could go to my website, helenyoungcoaching.com, and stay tuned for another guest next week. And I'll look forward to that conversation. Have a good week. Bye.